Hey everyone, my name is Wes, and welcome back to Terror Talk, where I discuss creepy clips online. Just to set up clear expectations, this is a commentary channel on scary stories and weird stuff. So, if commentaries are a thing, you're in the right place. The original horror music at the end of my videos was composed by me. Now, let's get into it and have some fun.
In October 2017, in the city of Santa Rosa, California, a 15-year-old high school student named Connor Hastings disappeared while walking home from school. He took the same route every day, a suburban street surrounded by homes and parks. But one afternoon, he didn't show up. His mom called him, but there was no answer. When she checked with friends, no one had seen him since he left school. By 7 p.m., police were notified, and a search began immediately. His backpack was found a day later, dumped behind a dumpster a few blocks from his usual route, but his phone was gone. For weeks, the case dominated local headlines. Police dogs tracked a scent trail that ended suddenly at the edge of a wooded trail, where it seemed to just stop. It was strange because no tire tracks were left behind, and there were zero witnesses. When detectives questioned classmates, rumors began spreading. Some kids claimed Connor had been acting paranoid in the days just before he went missing, like he was jumping at noises and asking people if they'd seen the man in the red jacket. One friend said Connor had recently asked about how to tell if you're being watched. The trail went cold, but 5 minutes later, in March of 2018, Connor returned, or rather, he was found. A 911 call came in from a payphone, one of the few still operating in the area. The caller reported a teenage boy sitting on a bench, unresponsive, outside a small town library 60 miles away. When police found Connor, he was silent and staring ahead. His hair was much longer than when he'd last been seen, and his clothes were filthy. He had a spiral bound notebook clutched in both hands, but it was completely blank. He wouldn't speak for over 24 hours. When his parents arrived, he hugged his mother tightly and then burst into tears. But even then, he said very little about where he had been. Over the next few days, he opened up only slightly. He claimed he had been taken by a group, but couldn't describe their faces. He said they kept him somewhere without clocks, somewhere cold. When police asked how he escaped, he said, "They just let me go. I think I passed their test." A month later, he gave one final statement before refusing to speak publicly again. He said, "There were others. I heard them. I wasn't the only one, but I might be the only one they gave back." The notebook he had been holding the night he was found remained empty. No one could get him to write anything in it. But on the final page in the bottom corner, written in shaky pen, were four words: "I was not alone." Police never identified any suspects. The FBI reviewed the case, but released no findings. Connor eventually changed schools and now lives under a different name. To this day, his case is officially solved because he came back. But nobody really believes that that's the end of the story.
Yeah, what do you think about that? That's pretty crazy that he was held captive, and apparently there were other people there. And saying that I think I passed their test. Like, what test? Like, that's pretty crazy that he was just let go just because he passed a test. So, there's a lot of crazy shit that goes on in the world, isn't there? But it's always good to have a missing persons case resolved and turned up. But yeah, it seems like there's more to this story than meets the eye. But definitely interesting, huh?
On the night of February 9th, 2004, a 21-year-old nursing student named Maura Murray vanished after a minor car crash on a remote stretch of Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. Nearly 2 decades later, no one knows where she went, what she was running from, or who might have been waiting for her. Earlier that day, Maura left her dorm at UMass Amherst after sending emails to her professors, telling them there had been a death in the family and she'd be gone for a few days. But no one in her family had died. In fact, no one in her life was planning to leave. She packed a bag, withdrew nearly all the money from her bank account, and bought a few items, including alcohol, from a nearby store. Then she drove north into the White Mountains, alone and quietly, without a clear destination. At approximately 7:27 p.m., a A local woman called 911 to report a car accident outside her house. A small black Saturn had crashed into a snowbank on a sharp turn. When police arrived 20 minutes later, they found the vehicle, but no sign of the driver. The car was locked and the windshield was cracked. Both airbags had deployed. A box of wine was spilled across the interior. The only thing missing was Maura. A bus driver who lived nearby had seen her just minutes before police arrived. He stopped and spoke to her through the window. She looked cold and shaken, but declined help. He drove off and called in the accident, but by the time the officers reached the scene, Maura had vanished. Not just walked away, vanished. Police dogs tracked her scent for about 100 yards up the road. Then it stopped abruptly. No footprints in the woods or any belongings left behind. It was like someone picked her up in a car just out of view. Her phone and credit cards were never used again. The bottles of alcohol she had bought, some were gone, and some remained in the car. There were no obvious signs of foul play, but nothing added up. She had no history of mental illness. Friends and family said she wasn't suicidal. She was planning for the future, and yet she was gone. In the years that followed, her case became one of the most obsessively followed mysteries on the internet. Armchair detectives, forums, and podcasters picked apart every detail. Some believed she staged her disappearance to start a new life. Others believed she was abducted by a stranger or someone she arranged to meet. Then there are darker theories. A serial predator operating in the mountains, or a cover up. But nothing concrete ever came, and her body was never found. Something obviously happened to Maura Murray that night. Something that was likely deliberate. To this day, the forest around Route 112 still holds its secrets. The most chilling part is if she was taken, whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing and never made a single mistake.
Yeah, what do you think about that story? Do you think that she was taken or abducted, or did she stage her own disappearance because, maybe she was sick of her own life or something like that? I mean, I feel like when people stage their disappearance, I feel like that doesn't happen all too often. Like, I feel like that's kind of a rare thing to do. I think a lot more people would actually commit suicide than stage a disappearance and start a new life, just because staging a disappearance and starting a new life, I think, would take a lot of work. Like, imagine how much work that would take, honestly. Like, if you were to stage your own disappearance and start a fresh new life somewhere else, like, no one knows you, you cut off all your contacts, like, all of your contacts, which is probably, a fair amount. That would take a lot of work. So, yeah, I mean, the easier route is suicide, obviously, but I don't know. It almost kind of sounds like she was abducted by some kind of killer in the woods, huh? Your typical horror story. But let me know what you think of in the comments below, because that is kind of a creepy story. And I can see why people would have gotten obsessed with that online. So let's watch the seventh story.
In the remote town of Nome, Alaska, a place isolated by hundreds of miles of tundra, accessible mostly by air, people are used to strange things happening. The winters are long and brutal, and the nights seem endless. But even there, among the quiet snow covered streets and howling wind, the disappearance of Rick Hills in 2004 is something people still whisper about. Not because it was the only one, but because of how it happened and what was left behind. Rick Hills was a 37-year-old electrician, hardworking, quiet, not particularly social, but he was well liked by the people who knew him. He lived alone in a small cabin on the outskirts of town, near the edge of the wilderness. It was not unusual in Nome to be that isolated. Many people preferred it. But Rick's case became more disturbing when it was discovered he wasn't the first one to go missing from that area.
How do you feel about being isolated like that out in the middle of the wilderness? Would you like it? Because I personally feel like I would hate it. And let me know if you have any creepy stories about that kind of thing in the comments below, being isolated out in the wilderness like that, because I really think I would just absolutely despise it and detest it, like with all my personality. But that's just me. Let me know how you feel in the comments below.
In fact, in the 10 years before he vanished, Over 20 people had disappeared from Nome under similarly strange circumstances. The FBI would eventually investigate it as a pattern, but Rick's story was different, more personal, terrifying. On November 13, 2004, Rick failed to show up for work. His boss called him repeatedly, to no avail. That evening, a coworker drove to Rick's cabin. His truck was there and the lights were off. It had snowed lightly that afternoon, but when they got closer, they noticed something strange. No footprints in or out of the cabin. It was like Rick had never left or returned. The coworker knocked, but there was no response. So we walked around the property and saw that the back door was open. He called out and stepped inside. The place was undisturbed. The coffee pot was full and his cell phone was on the table, but there was no sign of Rick himself. The weirdest part was the bed was made, not like someone had just gotten out of it. The weird part was that the bed was made so neatly, it looked as though no one had ever been in it. The coworker called the police, and they searched the home. Then they searched the surrounding area, and then the woods. They brought dogs, drones, helicopters, and still found nothing. Even with the light snowfall, there should have been some sign of direction, like a trail or blood or something, but there was no trace. The man walked out of his cabin with no coat, no boots, no keys, and simply just disappeared. The investigation didn't find foul play. He reportedly had no enemies or debts. Even his bank account was untouched, and his phone had not pinged a tower since the day before. But then, 2 days later, something happened that the public wasn't told about until years later. A hiker about 30 miles north of Nome found something bizarre. A man's sock frozen into the mud of a game trail. Nearby, hidden under a thin layer of snow, was an old Polaroid photograph. It was dirty and crumpled, and its image nearly destroyed by the cold, but the outline was clear. It was Rick's cabin, shot from the woods. The angle showed the living room window, and in the reflection was a face, but it wasn't Rick's. The photo was turned over to the police, but they never released it to the public. Years later, an officer who worked the case anonymously told a local journalist that it was the most disturbing thing he'd ever seen in his career, that the face in the reflection didn't look entirely human. He described it as off, like distorted, pale, the eyes too wide, and the mouth slightly open, as if it had been caught mid-whisper, like someone caught staring who didn't expect to be seen, as he described it. The area was searched again, but nothing was found, and no further signs of Rick. Locals started calling it the Watcher, saying something in the woods had been taking people. The disappearances dated back decades. Natives had legends about the Dark Man, a thing that lived between the trees and came out at night. The FBI eventually got involved. They said the disappearances were likely due to weather, accidents, and alcohol. But not Rick. People close to the case knew better. They knew it wasn't weather and it wasn't a misadventure. Rick was used to those woods. He wouldn't have wandered out barefoot without a jacket in sub-zero temperatures. He would not have left his door open. He wouldn't have vanished without a single track in the snow. To this day, Rick Hills has never been found. Some say it was just a tragic accident. Others say Rick saw something he shouldn't have, something that was watching him. Rick Hills has never been found.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just didn't want it to go on and play to a next freaking video. Because that's always annoying when it just auto plays like that. But yeah, I thought that this was a really interesting, this last story in particular was really interesting because the Dark Man, I feel like that could totally be made into a horror film, or this series of disappearances could be totally turned into a horror film. And it could be called The Dark Man because how creepy and cool is it? I mean cool in a sense that, like, wow, if it actually is real. But how kind of crazy is it that there is some kind of like dark figure, you know, some kind of like dark entity, humanoid figure lurking between the trees in Alaska like that. Like, dang, and kidnapping these people. Like, that is such a cool horror film synopsis and plot right there, in my opinion. Obviously, it's really sad that these people are going missing, but I love it when there's kind of like mythological theories and plots behind these kind of things, don't you? Because I feel like that is really awesome when it kind of goes into like a mythical paranormal realm, which is kind of how this story developed. So I thought these were definitely cool stories and creepy stories, also sad, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed my commentary and the music, and I will see you in the next video.